Welcome to today's Daily PBJ Devotional. If you're reading the Old Testament with us this year, read Exodus 17, Job 35, and Psalm 64. This devotional is about Exodus 17. Then the whole congregation of Israel left the desert of Sin, moving from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So the people contended with Moses. "Give us water to drink." "Why do you contend with me?" Moses replied. "Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. "Why have you brought us out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What should I do with these people? A little more, and they will stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Walk on ahead of the people, and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take along in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. And when you strike the rock, water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. He named the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" After this, the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some of our men to go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on the hilltop with the staff of God in my hand." Joshua did as Moses had instructed him and fought against the Amalekites, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, Israel prevailed. But when he lowered them, Amalek prevailed. When Moses' hands grew heavy, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Then Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on each side, so that his hands remained steady until the sun went down. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his army with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this on a scroll as a reminder, and recite it to Joshua, because I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." Indeed, he said, a hand was lifted up toward the throne of the Lord. The Lord will war against Amalek from generation to generation. This is God's word. The people of Israel lived as slaves in Egypt. They were oppressed and abused by the Egyptians. But at least the Egyptians provided for their needs. Now that God had liberated them, they have their freedom, but that meant that their Egyptian overlords were no longer there to provide them with food and water and shelter. In Exodus 16, they looked back with nostalgia at their time as slaves. In Exodus 16:3, we read, "In Egypt, we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Those are the words of the NIV in the previous chapter before today's reading, that is Exodus 16, verse 3. It seems like they were exaggerating how well the Egyptians provided for them, but faced with starvation and dehydration, the meager provisions of slavery seemed better. Here in Exodus 17, which we read today, Moses and the Israelites needed a miracle to survive. God provided that miracle through Moses, according to verses 5 through 7, and then protected them from the attacks of the Amalekites, according to verses 8 through 16. Before providing these things, however, God let Moses and the Israelites feel the crisis of their lack of food and water. Why did he do that? Well, one reason was so that the people would learn to depend on him. As a free people, they would need to learn how to provide for themselves. But God wanted them to know that they were not alone. He was watching over them to provide for them and bless them. These crises in the desert were designed to make God's people look to him when they needed help, not to look to the Egyptians who had provided for them for so long. These crises had another effect as well. Did you notice how God made a point in verse 5 of having Moses and the elders of Israel stand before the people? And in the battle with the Amalekites, notice how Joshua was designated by Moses to lead the battle in verse 9. And then the Lord commanded Moses to make sure Joshua heard his commands about the Amalekites in verses 14 and 15. All of these things were designed by God to teach the people to trust the Lord and the human leaders that God chose for them. These trials were also designed to teach the leaders that God would be with them and make their leadership effective. Crises have a way of revealing what and who we trust, and each one is an opportunity to relocate our trust in a godly direction. Keep this in mind if you're facing a crisis, or if you encounter one soon. Is the Lord testing your faith and exposing whether or not your trust is where it should be? Use the moments of trial in your life to turn to the Lord in full dependence so that your trust is fully in Him. If you found this devotional helpful, please sign up to be helped by it every day. Go to dailypbj.com/subscribe. Consider supporting me financially if you find these devotionals helpful as well. Go to dailypbj.com/support. Please share this with someone who might be in a trial themselves, and I'll see you next time. May God bless you. I hope you have a great day.